Wouldn't mind it. There it is. All right. Well, let me be the first to welcome you and thank you for attending our penultimate webinar in this year's Earth Matters webinar series. I am as excited as always to co-host while learning about important land and aquatic health issues and practices from our amazing lineup of presenters. My name is Brian Striniti, and I'm the Outreach and Preserve Manager with the Dutchess Land Conservancy. Tonight, we're super excited to welcome an amazing team of people from the New York State DEC and the Hudson River Foundation to talk about the state of the estuary. Before we get started, my role tonight is to go over some basic logistics about this webinar. After that, our Education Director, Julie Hart, will provide a brief introduction to the Dutchess Land Conservancy and tonight's presenters. First, you are muted and chat is disabled for this event to ensure that there is no interruption during the presentation. Second, the raise hand function is disabled. However, you can answer all your questions into the Q&A box at any point during the presentation. You can access this box at the bottom center of your screen. Questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation or by our team during the presentation if possible. If there are a large amount of questions, we will try to combine them based on topics. Third, closed captioning is enabled for this event. To turn on this function, please select the CC icon located at the bottom right of your screen. And finally, now that we're done with the logistics, I'll hand it over to Julie, who will tell you a bit about the DLC, this webinar series, and tonight's guest presenters. Julie.
Thank you, Brian. I'm Julie Hart, an ecologist and educator here at the Dutchess Land Conservancy, and I'm so glad you all could join us this evening. Many of you are probably familiar with the DLC, but for anyone who's not, here's a quick overview. The Dutchess Land Conservancy is a private nonprofit land conservation organization located in the Hudson Valley of New York State. And we're dedicated to preserving the farms and forests, wetlands and waterways, open spaces, and wildlife habitats of Dutchess County. We are an accredited land trust, and since our founding in 1985, we've worked with hundreds of landowners and protected over 48,000 acres of land. We are grateful to all of these conservation-minded folks and grateful to our sponsors, the Molly B. Schaefer Education Fund, Labella Associates, and StructureWorks. So in this season of the Earth Matters webinar series, we've been focusing on the topic of land health, asking questions like, what do we mean when we talk about land health, and how can we ourselves be part of making the land more healthy? We're asking you to think about your relationship with the land and consider how you can be part of its healing and restoration. I hope that these webinars help you to connect more deeply with the landscapes around you, to read the stories found in our lands and waters, and to see the complex interactions of plants and wildlife, and find a new appreciation for the diverse and resilient ecosystems and communities that surround and support us all. So tonight, we're really excited to welcome this awesome team. We have Ingrid Hakel and Anna Boutsikaris from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and Isabel Stinnett from the Hudson River Foundation. They all work to conserve and ensure the resiliency of the estuary and the watershed. Now, with the theme of land health, you may be wondering why we're talking about the river tonight. But as you'll see, the way we take care of the land directly impacts our water quality, both the underground waters from which most of us get our drinking water, and the surface waters, our streams, ponds, wetlands, lakes, and rivers in which we swim, fish, and paddle. Here in the Hudson Valley and also in our neighboring Housatonic Valley, we're so fortunate to have lots of local agencies and organizations who study and monitor the health of the watershed and provide guidance for our conservation, restoration, and management goals. So let me introduce you to the team. Ingrid is the manager of the Hudson River Estuary program at the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, where she oversees the program's outreach, funding, and research. That research is focused on river habitat restoration, watershed management, conservation and land use planning, climate resilience, education, and river access. Isabel is the Senior Scientist for Ecological Restoration with the New York, New Jersey Harbor and Estuary Program at the Hudson River Foundation, where she leads strategic initiatives in habitat restoration, coordinates interagency work groups, and conducts environmental assessments such as the State of the Estuary Report. Anna is also from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and she focuses on protecting surface water drinking supplies in the Hudson Valley. by supporting implementation of drinking water source protection program plans and leading water quality monitoring and assessment activities. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the team to talk about the state of the estuary, the report which was released just last year. And as a side note, when I was cleaning off my shelves recently, I found the state of the estuary report from 2015 and the one from 2010. It's a report that's released occasionally, and it's a great resource for all of us here in the Hudson River Estuary.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I'm going to kick us off. Um, just bear with me 1 second while I share my screen. Does that look all right to everyone? Okay, great. Thank you. Again, thank you for hosting us. We're really excited to talk about the state of the estuary today. Um, I guess I'll just kick us off by saying, what we're going to talk about today. We're going to each of our respective programs, the Harbor and Estuary Program and the Hudson River Estuary Program. We're going to talk about our various programs and then how we came together to do this report. And then we're going to go into the results of the State of the Estuary Report. And then we're going to talk a little bit at the end about how those results have helped us shape our program and our actions going forward. So I'll just jump in quickly and talk about the New York, New Jersey Harbor and Estuary Program. And again, yes, this is the same thing as the Hudson River Foundation. If you've heard of that, we're the same organization. This is just a program within the Hudson River Foundation. This is a map showing where we operate. So we have a huge watershed. We're a bi-state organization, New York and New Jersey. So the lower Hudson River watershed. And then in New Jersey, the lower Raritan and Raritan Bay watersheds as well. And you can see in the map that we have this like lighter colored area in the kind of more urban, saltier part of the estuary. That's where we tend to focus our work a little bit more. So yes, we are one of the nation's 28 national estuary program. We're funded by the EPA through the Clean Water Act, and our goal is to bring the benefits of the Clean Water Act to the people who live and work and recreate along the estuary. So here is just a slide showing a little bit more about what we do. We have our program is organized around these 5 main goals. We have water quality, reduce the sources of pollution entering the harbor. We do habitat related research and outreach and organization to protect and restore the habitat. We work on public access issues along the estuary. We work to support sustainable port and maritime operations. And also we do a lot of community engagement. So you'll see also the State of the Estuary report is also kind of organized around these 5 goals. And now I'll kick it over to the Hudson River Estuary Program.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ingrid Heckel, and again, thanks for hosting our presentation this evening. We're really pleased to join you. So I'll share a little background about the Hudson River Estuary Management Program. We're a special program at the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. The program is established through state legislation back in 1987 to protect, conserve, restore, and enhance the Hudson River Estuary and its watershed. And we work in the areas draining to the tidal river from New York City Harbor to the Federal Dam in Troy and throughout the watershed. Similarly to the Harbor and Estuary Program, we're guided by a 5-year action agenda that lays out our goals and actions And our work is funded primarily through New York State's Environmental Protection Fund. So under this bigger estuary management umbrella, I lead the Hudson River Estuary program, which focuses on our community engagement and partner engagement work, our grants program, and our work on watershed management, conservation and land use, climate, and river access. And then we also have the Hudson River National Estuary and Research Reserve, the Hudson and Delaware Marine Fisheries Unit, and our DEC Region 3 marine habitat staff that are involved in regulatory and permitting work in tidal waters. Next slide, please. Thanks. So we're about to release our new 2026 to 2030 Hudson River Estuary Action Agenda. It's very exciting. We've been working on this for over two and a half years now. This is our strategic plan, which lays out actions to be taken by DEC and our many public and private partners to conserve and restore the ecosystem. And the action agenda includes 8 goals. Those are broadly grouped around the vital river ecosystem, including robust fish populations and river habitats and clean water, a thriving and resilient watershed, including healthy tributaries, climate adaptive communities, and conserved natural areas, and community connections to the river, including an informed and engaged public and an accessible Hudson River for all people. Within each goal, the action agenda includes measurable 5-year targets that we will track and report our progress on, and there are more detailed actions under each to achieve the targets. Next slide. The Estuary Management Program relies on a wide range of partnerships to achieve success, and that includes working at all levels of government with nonprofit organizations and community organizations, academic and research partners, and private landowners. Our staff also deliver outreach, education, and technical assistance. We provide grant funding to implement priorities in the action agenda, and we fund restoration projects and research and monitoring work. And this collaborative approach helps us to achieve real on-the-ground progress and produces powerful regional results. So state law requires that the program provide periodic status reports on the condition of the estuary, and the State of the Hudson Report, or Estuary Report, is a response to those requirements. And we began partnering with Hudson River Foundation on this report a couple of years ago. So I'll pass it back to Isabel.
Great, thanks. Lost my mute button there for a second. So what is the State of the Estuary Report now that you know a little bit more about who we are? So the State of the Estuary Report it's a data-driven assessment of various indicators of ecosystem health. So what that means is, we've gotten together with a bunch of the scientists throughout the region and said, what things do we really need to track and monitor in order to assess the health of our estuary and see how our estuary is doing throughout time. So we're looking at long-term trends. So the results from this report that you'll see are give or take about 20 years. So we know that there have been some environmental successes and issues prior to the 20-year time span, but this report generally focuses on about that length. And so as Ingrid mentioned, and also Julie, we've had several different iterations of the state of the estuary and the state of the Hudson throughout the years. Our program was doing the state of the estuary report, and their program was doing the state of the Hudson report. And we decided that, as you can see in this map here, our watersheds overlap, and it's all the same estuary. So there's no sense in us not working together on this assessment and really make a joint report that meets the needs of both of our programs. So, and then notably this time, It's all online. So we'll of course drop you the link to the full State of the Estuary report, and it's something that you can toggle through. It's interactive, it's data at your fingertips, and it's no longer like a big you know, packet to put on your shelf or a PDF you need to print out. But it's it's something that's always going to be available wherever you are online. And then just to note, we'll be doing this periodically. So we do plan to do this again to prepare for the next action agendas of our program. So in about 8 years' time or so. So just to acknowledge, this was put together by us and our various programs, but not alone. It's been a real partnership effort with data coming from multiple organizations all around the estuary and a technical review committee of over 20 members who are experts in their field. So it's a pretty intense data-driven report. And because it is, there's a whole nother document that is the methodology behind this report. So if you are into digging into the data a little bit further, you can find the methodology document as well, and it'll tell you the source of every single piece of data and the exact methods and how we calculated all the trends. So I'm going to start in by just giving a kind of overview. We're not going to talk about all of the trends from the State of the Estuary report. We kind of picked a batch that we thought would be particularly meaningful for you folks. But you'll see as I kind of go through this, these trend indicators, that generally green means things are improving, red means things are deteriorating environmentally. The kind of yellow squiggles mean it's like a mixed trend, or it's not trending, and then the gray dots are just kind of we don't really know yet. It's like, we need more data. So you kind of see those indicators throughout the report, and as you can see here, these are the water quality indicators we looked at. Generally, after all, overall, you're seeing, more green arrows than not. Water quality is generally getting better, and we'll dig into some of those right now or in a minute. So this is the little bit of the overview of the habitat indicators. Habitat indicators as a whole are not doing so well, and we'll dig into those a little bit too. Habitat is more vulnerable in our estuary. And then we're going to look briefly at contamination, which, some things getting better, some things not so much. Community engagement and public access are really some highlighting some successes in what's been going on throughout the estuary. So you'll hear from that too. So I'll start off with water quality. Anna, was I doing this one, or are you going to jump over?
I'll just jump in quickly. I'm Anna Boutsikaris again. Thanks for having me. And the couple of water quality trends that Isabel is actually going to talk about soon are measured through the estuary program supported Hudson River Estuary Condition Observing System, or RECOS is what we call it. And it is a network of almost real-time water quality and weather monitoring stations that are all throughout the Hudson River watershed. And they're recording water quality and weather conditions every 15 minutes. And this is a long-term continuous data set. And it's available online for you to explore. So yeah, this is an observational network on the Hudson River Estuary to look at water quality parameters that are listed here, including temperature, specific conductance, dissolved oxygen, pH, and turbidity. And a few of the stations are also measuring chlorophyll and phycocyanin. So this is a really important long-term data set that we've had on the Hudson River since 2008 when it was established. And it's providing a backbone of these like basic long-term monitoring data sets, which are pretty rare and pretty valuable. So they're here to support the use of data in different educational settings or academic settings, such as the State of the Estuary report. But I'm going to pass it back to Isabel to go through how those RECOS station trends are going. And there's a couple of stations that are right down in Dutchess County, like at Tivoli Bays, but you'll see how those stations are doing.
Great, thanks, Anna. So yeah, let's just jump in. You'll see these are all the HRECO stations that we looked at. There are more, as Anna said, but we looked particularly at these 8, I believe, because they had that really strong long-term data at these stations. So these are the ones we kind of focused on for the State of the Estuary report. Dissolved oxygen, if you're not so familiar with it, it's really important to monitor in terms of fish health and aquatic life because the fish really depend on the oxygenation of the water. So, in terms of trends, we said that this was a mixed trend. Estuary wide, there was no kind of consensus on where things were going for dissolved oxygen. And our local scientists weren't exactly sure why some of the stations looked like the dissolved oxygen levels were getting lower. And then Poughkeepsie, for some reason, it's getting a little bit better. But they were thinking that it's likely due to localized conditions rather than kind of estuary-wide changes. And the next one we'll look at is maybe the most significant finding of the State of the Estuary report, which is noticeably water temperatures are going up. So you can kind of see it's the up arrow, but it's red, meaning it's not a good thing. So we're definitely seeing water temperatures rise. And this is even, the last time we did the State of the Estuary report. I'm trying to remember when that was, maybe 6 years ago, we did not see the same trend. So this is really something that's happening now and quickly. And so you can see that it's rising at 3 of the HRECO stations. And then I'll just flip to this slide is showing all the different monitoring stations for water temperature in kind of the lower part of the estuary. You can see the different basins, and we kind of group the data by basins, and you can see the water temperature from I think it's 2000 to 2024, and almost all of the water bodies, the temperatures are rising every year. So that's really a big climate shift that we are seeing coming in from warming ocean temperatures. So that's definitely having an effect on a lot of things in our estuary. Next up for some good news, we also track floatable debris. And some of the ways we used to track is we took these kind of long-term beach cleanup operations, and these are organizations that do it every year. They're really good about tracking their data, what they find, and yeah, have a great, big volunteer efforts and really get a lot of trash from our shorelines. You can see down at the bottom Riverkeeper Sweep, which some of you might have been involved in, and I know they have some sites up in Dutchess County. And what you can see here is, it looks like the data, they're getting less and less trash as time goes by. And that might be a little confusing because you're thinking, well, that's not a good thing. But the thing is, this is averaged across effort. So they're putting in the same amount of effort every year, and they're coming up with less and less trash. So that means there's less and less trash there for them to find. So we're seeing that across all these different data sets, which is really good news. So now I'll flip on to some of the habitat indicators, and I think Anna's going to kick us back off on this.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to get to complete these next 2 analyses, which I get to talk about, and they're directly related to the work that I get to do with my teammates here in the Watershed team, which Ingrid oversees. And so the next 2 indicators are going to be about tributary and habitat connectivity. Part of what our program does is we try to remove outdated dams that are causing blockage for aquatic organism passage, and we fund plans for replacing culverts like the one that you'll see on the right, which you can see is definitely a block for aquatic organism passage. It's perched, there's a big scour pool underneath it. It's not the type of thing that we want to be seeing in the estuary. And there are just so many dams and undersized culverts across the estuary that are barriers for continuous traversable habitat for organisms that are in those streams, aquatic and semi-aquatic streams. And there's over 200 direct tributaries that are pouring fresh water into the estuary. And if we have a connected, undammed habitat where there's flowing water, that's going to bring better water quality into the river estuary proper downstream. So the next slide will show you the results of these two indicators, in which I got all of the dams per HUC 12. So the HUC, the hydrologic unit code, it's just a mini watershed that the USGS has. Oh, that looks good to me, Isabel. Yeah, and so on the left-hand side is the map showing the number of dams per stream kilometer. So you can see that it's more constricted down low. And then the map on the right is the number of culverts that are posing a moderate, severe, or major impact for aquatic connectivity. So you can see those areas in which, yeah, there's barriers to aquatic organisms like those culverts that we saw in the slide above. So yeah, this is a baseline study, but we'll redo this because hopefully, we'll remove some more dams and we'll replace some more culverts in the next 8 years. So hopefully that will be reflected the next time we do this analysis. And the next indicator is about riparian area. So we all know, right, that riparian areas are the areas of land alongside streams and rivers, and when they're vegetated and forested, that's playing a crucial role in maintaining water quality. And I'm sure the Dutchess Land Conservancy will work on riparian buffer stuff in your area. So we have a great program called Trees for Tribs, which is where I got my start at the estuary program. And here's an example of a Trees for Tributaries planting, and we're going to give more information about that program at the end of the presentation. But this is what a riparian area looks like 7 years after growth. So this is a planting site along the east branch of the Wappinger Creek in Millbrook. It's right by the elementary school. And the analysis tries to capture this change, this land use change along the riparian areas. So it takes time for these habitats to grow, but I think that they look pretty beautiful, especially in the fall, as you can see, because we have so many beautiful deciduous trees. But yeah, this is an example of on the ground what this planting site looks like. And on the next slide, you'll see what it looks like from an aerial overview, how that forest can grow in just 6 or 7 planting seasons. And the analysis that I completed for the New York section was capturing, you'll see it on the next slide, it is an assessment of land use changes within that riparian buffer area over 20 years, so between 2001 and 2021. And a negative change is represented when natural land converted to developed land. So if anyone is familiar with the National Land Cover data set, they group all land types into different categories. And when something was moved from a forest to barren land or developed, then that was considered as a negative change, and that changed from green to orange in this map. And a positive change is when developed land was restored back to natural land. So, like maybe that Millbrook planting site would be captured as a green, a positive change, thanks to people restoring that area along that riparian zone. And generally, it was pretty even in New York State. So the next slide is just a different representation of the analysis that you saw above. So this is just showing what categories of natural land use, how the land use change shifted from one type to another. So you can see here that it looks like there was a lot more replacement with herbaceous wetlands, and we're not sure what caused that, but there was a pretty large amount of acres gained as herbaceous wetlands, and it was more even in the scrub zone. And then there was some loss from forest back to a developed land category types. So, there's a lot of natural fluctuations. It's a pretty large scale analysis, but there were some areas that were lost and gained from a non-natural development. Just people changing the land in some way. So that is that result. And I'm going to pass it off to Ingrid for the next slide to talk about the significant biodiversity areas.
Thanks. So this next metric looks at areas that were identified in the Hudson River Estuary Program's Wildlife and Habitat Conservation Framework, which is a report going back about 20 years ago, which identified 22 significant biodiversity areas in the estuary watershed, which are areas that have unique topography, geology, hydrology, and diverse plant and animal communities. The program has promoted SBAs as regional conservation priorities within municipal land use planning and with our land trust partners. And within Dutchess County, some examples include the Hudson River tidal ecosystem itself, the Hudson Highlands in the southern portion of the county, and the Dutchess County wetlands and Harlem Valley calcareous wetlands complexes. So this is an example, a photo from Thompson Pond Preserve, which is one of the 4 major wetland complexes in the Dutchess County wetlands, which is unique in terms of being like large major wetland areas and hosts the highest diversity of turtle species in New York State. Next slide, please. These maps show the amount of protected land within the SBAs. So the darker areas are protected land, it might be state protected or protected by a land trust. The lighter green areas are unprotected areas within those SBAs. And so we looked at both the overall amount of protected land within each of the SBAs, as well as recent trends of the amount of protection that occurred in the last 5 years. Next slide. So this chart shows, or graph shows the percentage of land conserved within the SBAs from 2020 to 2024. Altogether, there was about 11,000 acres of land protected across the estuary watershed within the SBAs, with really noteworthy increases in some of the higher elevation areas, such as the Hudson Highlands, the Catskill Mountains, and the Shawangunk Ridge, as well as on the Rensselaer Plateau in the northern end of our region. However, many of the SBAs remain vulnerable, having 80% or more of their land in private ownership unprotected, including the Dutchess County wetlands complexes, which during this time frame had just 80 acres of additional land protection occur. I'll hand it back over to Isabel.
Great, thanks. So I'm going to touch on the next habitat indicator, which is tidal wetlands. So for this, we are looking at tidal wetlands, as essentially tidal freshwater wetlands along the Hudson. This analysis doesn't consider the kind of salt marsh wetlands that exist down in the city. Advance my slide here. So we looked at wetland loss over time. The DEC has done some really good job using aerial photography to kind of map where the tidal wetlands are along the Hudson. And so they had a map come out in 2008 and another one in 2018. And so we could do the best we could at trying to see where the wetlands have we've lost or gained or shifted. So in general, we are losing wetlands along the Hudson. We're losing tidal wetlands kind of globally, if you're familiar with that, due to both sea level rise and development. But we are losing throughout in the city and on the New Jersey side and along the Hudson as well. So this is the data kind of in this strange pie chart of what we have lost the 119 acres of tidal wetlands to. Some of it is not entirely clear from the mapping, what's kind of replaced the wetlands, but for some of it, we've seen that some of the wetlands have been submerged and are now water or mud flat or water chestnuts. Um, some of it has, sediment has accreted and it's become more upland. But overall, you can see that a lot of this change, our scientists think that it's, somewhat natural fluctuations and highlights different shoreline processes. The Hudson is a very dynamic river, and we're seeing just shorelines kind of do their natural thing and change pretty dynamically here. But it is leading to kind of an overall net loss of tidal wetlands. Moving on to submerged aquatic vegetation. So this is, if you're not super familiar with it, it's the species that grow under the water. So it's not, the wetlands are intertidal, whereas the submerged aquatic vegetation are always under the water. So they're always aquatic plants. There's some great data that's taken quite regularly from the DEC, showing kind of mapping where the submerged aquatic vegetation is over time. So what we're looking at here is 1997, and you're looking at the light green bars. So it was really decimated in 2011 and 2012 by the big hurricanes we had. Sandy and Lee, and folks I think along the Hudson were pretty worried about it. But then it proved to be a pretty resilient community, and as you can see with the light green bars, it's kind of bounced back quite well. It's not to levels that it was at our high in 1997 and 2002. But managers are really thinking that the population is looking pretty stable, and they're not quite as concerned. I think the recovery is pretty good. This graph is also showing water chestnut, which is an invasive freshwater aquatic species, and I think that's something we also track because we're wondering if there's kind of a fight for space with these two species. And it looks like, while water chestnut has grown over the years, it hasn't really taken over the areas where the SAV is present all that much. So I think they're finding a kind of natural balance in a lot of the shallow waters of the Hudson. And this is back to Anna. Oh, wait, is this me? No, I'm sorry, this is me. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, so this next one that we looked at is looking at the shorelines themselves along the Hudson. And we wanted to see what percentage of them are natural shorelines and which have been engineered. And a lot of our shorelines have been engineered to stop from erosion and also to make the river and the estuary more amenable to shipping traffic. You can see some examples of the different kinds of engineering there is. There's a bulkhead here and a rock revetment in the lower picture here. And then this is kind of a picture of a sandy natural shoreline along the Hudson. But we could also get, a natural shoreline also includes the kind of rocky Hudson shorelines as well. It doesn't have to be necessarily sandy to be considered natural, but you can kind of see the differences here. So we wanted to take a look at throughout the Hudson these shorelines, and we're more in support of natural shorelines because they kind of allow for better connectivity between the land and the water of the estuary, and they help with things like pollution and with a lot of our wildlife species that where the shorelines are very important for parts of their life cycle. So we wanted to make sure that we took a look at this data and with an eye to, are there places where we could potentially soften the shorelines and remove the historic engineering and make it more of a shoreline softening, or if that's not possible, maybe create like a living shoreline project, which is, adding some sort of structure to the shoreline that makes it more ecologically friendly. So what you can see here on this map is the engineered shorelines in blue and the natural shorelines in green, and some of the our recent living shoreline projects throughout the estuary where folks have, done some alterations to the shorelines to try to encourage kind of greater ecological uplift. And I will say this map is particularly cool, along with the cool tributaries maps that Anna showed earlier on our website. They're very interactive, so you can kind of zoom into your area and see what the shoreline's looking like, and I encourage you to check that out. Okay, next up, stream health bioassessment. So this is just looking at stream health, and there's a way to look at stream health by monitoring the macroinvertebrates, the kind of large aquatic bugs that you find in these streams, and they have different community structure and different populations depending on how healthy that part of the stream is. So you can see a picture here of some of these creatures. And so the DEC goes out and monitors stream health based on these bioassessment strategies periodically. So what you can see here is kind of a zoomed in section of the most recent scores from these assessments in your section of New York. Uh, the blue is excellent, stream health. Green is good, and then down to poor is the red. And so these are things that we'll do, throughout time to get a look at kind of holistically on the watershed, what the health of our streams. Okay, so next up is fish. Um, So all the fish data I'm going to be showing is from long-term monitoring studies from the DEC. First up, you can see alewife and blueback herring. These are some of our species that are being monitored closely because they are struggling. These species are no longer targeted for any kind of fishing, but you can see here their abundance in these monitoring surveys, and then this orange line that goes across, that's recruitment failure. So that's really kind of it's a bad level where you want to see your populations above there, because then they're like more self-sustaining populations and they can increase their numbers. So both of these species are kind of toying around that recruitment level failure line, which is not so great. Both these species are migratory fish, so we think that bycatch out in the bight or in the ocean might be problematic for them. Next up, we have striped bass. Some of you are probably pretty familiar with. It's one of our favorite recreational fishing species. Their population is considered stable, though it is, somewhat low, and there are fishing restrictions, and it's one that the DEC actively manages. On shad, this is another one that was looking, pretty good going back to the late 90s, but the population has really crashed, and we're not seeing a recovery from the fishery being closed in 2010. Atlantic sturgeon, so cool. They're just, a fantastic endangered species that we are lucky enough to coexist with on the Hudson. And you can see the picture there of this gigantic fish. And they're, basically their population is, it seems like it's kind of going all over the place. It's definitely one that everybody's keeping tags on because it is a threatened species. But they seem to be doing okay in the Hudson for now, but we're definitely monitoring where these populations are going. Tomcod is an interesting one that we wanted to show because tomcod are really reacting to climate change. So tomcod is a species that they would find regularly along the Hudson, um, from when the survey started and throughout the 80s and 90s. And then we just stopped seeing them. And they're seeing more tomcod up north. So it seems like, we were really kind of out the southern end of the tomcod range. And as you were seeing these warming waters, the tomcod are responding and moving elsewhere. Next up is eels. I love eels. The DEC has the Hudson River Estuary Program has a fantastic community science driven eel monitoring program where folks can come out and kids do the monitoring, community members, and you can see that they are finding more and more eels regularly through this program. So it suggests that the Hudson River is playing a really important role in kind of the increasing population of these American eels. Okay, next up, we're going to switch gears away from habitats and just briefly touch into contamination. We're going to start off with PCBs. I know you folks are probably quite familiar with PCBs being on the Hudson. Um, PCBs are looking pretty good, actually. It's been a while since this has been a problem. This has been a problem in the Hudson for a long time now. Um, so the DEC regularly does contamination testing for PCBs on a number of different species. So that's what you can see here on these graphs that are going from the year 2000 to 2020. And these are three different species. There's striped bass, kind of at the northern end of where they're monitoring up by the Troy Dam. In mid-river, you're seeing the pumpkin seed on the right, and then further down in the estuary, you're seeing the white perch. So three different species, three different parts of the river, and you can see in all of them that there's a strong downward trend in the concentration of PCBs in these fish tissues. So the things are looking good. Though it is still not low enough where managers feel like it's safe to eat these fish. And I'll show you why in a second. So this is looking at the location effect of PCBs in fish. There's really a much stronger PCB signal the higher up you go in the estuary, starting at the Troy Dam. And so what you can see on this map and graph are five different locations, and the PCBs, each one of these bars is an individual fish. So, and this is all from the year, they're all striped bass, all in 2021. So you can just see the great variety between where you catch the fish and the level of contamination. And then, still down, as you can see from the big long bar, and that comes from Haverstraw Bay, and another one down the George Washington Bridge, you still have the possibility of catching and eating a really contaminated fish. So we're not quite there, especially given where you're located. Next up, go into cadmium briefly. I know a lot of you are probably familiar with the cadmium concentration that started in Foundry Cove, and where in the 60s and 70s, the Marathon Battery Company released a lot of cadmium into the river from their battery production facility. So this was determined a Superfund site, and I think it was one of the highest levels of cadmium that has been found across the country. And it was dredged and capped in 1990s by the EPA, but we're still monitoring blue crabs around the area, blue crabs in particular, because they tend to hang out by the sediment where the contamination is. Um, and monitor them for their cadmium concentrations. So this data is interesting, three different times of monitoring. So this first column, you can see on the left from 1979 to 1984. This was an assessment prior to the cleanup, and you can see really high levels of cadmium parts per million, especially in Foundry Cove. And then they did it again in 2004, and things were looking really rosy. The cadmium concentrations had fallen a lot. And then we did it again in 2021, just to kind of be sure things were still going in the right direction, and they weren't. And so at this point, we don't really know why the cadmium concentrations in blue crabs are high again. So that's kind of an ongoing research question for the managers of this area who are looking into contaminants. Okay, community engagement. I think I will stop rambling and kick it over to Ingrid.
Thanks. So the community engagement section focuses on participation in stewardship and community science programs, which have been growing in popularity each year. And these efforts help to raise awareness about the need to protect and restore waterways and natural areas in our watershed, as well as cultivate the next generation of environmental leaders and scientists. Stewardship can be broadly defined as taking care of or being responsible for the estuary, and our focus for this indicator is on stewardship events that bring together community members and students to celebrate and engage with the estuary. And we looked at some of the largest and most consistent events in the region for this analysis, including Riverkeeper's Sweep, which is an annual cleanup day organized by Hudson Riverkeeper. We looked at the City of Water Day, which is a celebration organized by the New York, New Jersey Harbor and Estuary Program and Waterfront Alliance. A Day in the Life of the Hudson and Harbor, which is an annual school event organized by the Hudson River Estuary Program with many partners, and Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory at Columbia University. And lastly, Submerge, which is a festival organized by Hudson River Park Trust's River Project. And so this trend has been improving. We know that the total number of community members and students participating in these events has grown dramatically since 2003. The number of hours that individuals have been committing to events has also been increasing, which suggests that people are deepening their engagement in stewardship. More recently, the growth has leveled off slightly, and we attribute that just simply to the fact that there's kind of a certain capacity and limit to these large-scale events. So we can't anticipate unlimited growth forever in participation, and that's not our goal either. Next slide. So this map shows the locations of these events held in 2023. And it's worth noting that in addition to the increase in overall numbers of participants, we've also seen an expansion in the spatial extent of locations where these events are held, and that's allowing more people to access and participate in them across the region. Next slide. So this community engagement participation in community science indicator looks at participation in several programs that are led by the Hudson River Estuary Program, including our Trees for Tribs program, Amphibian Migrations and Road Crossings project, and the EEL project. And we'll tell you a little bit more about these programs at the end during volunteer opportunities. But similarly, this trend has been improving. We're seeing overall increase in volunteers participating in these projects, as well as the time spent committed to them, suggesting that deepening engagement. Next slide. So the final area of the report looks at public access, and public access has been a wonderful success story resulting from investments at local, state, and federal levels. These maps show different types of on-water access points for recreation, including bathing beaches, fishing sites, boat launches, and marinas or boat clubs. And as water quality has improved on the estuary over the past 50 years, we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of public access sites along the estuary, really most notably around New York City, but also upriver. Next slide. So this slide shows the number of shoreline access sites per county, and the bar graph illustrates the breakdown between the different access site types. More access to the estuary exists now than it has in many generations. This is allowing people to enjoy the river and fostering stewardship and connection with the surrounding communities. Next slide. So along with improvements in water quality, we've seen a rise in interest in swimming in the estuary. And this is perhaps the ultimate form of direct access. Having safe opportunities to enter the water has also become more important as our summer temperatures have risen with climate change and people are seeking opportunities to cool off. Public participation in open water swimming events is limited, but it represents one measure of public interest in swimming in the Hudson. And these events have occurred regularly since around 2000. Interest in them is continuing to rise. The chart shows the overall number of open water swimming events since 2000, as well as number of participants, including swimmers in active events. And in 2022, there were over 3,000 swimmers in open water events. The river pool in Beacon hosts the annual Newburgh to Beacon swim in July each year. And that's me on the left making a swim right by the Newburgh Beacon Bridge last summer. It was really a highlight of my year, and I'm excited to do it again. It was very exciting to be swimming in the Hudson. Next slide. Isabel, I'll hand it back to you.
Great, thanks. I didn't know there was a picture of you. That's so great. Yeah, so I know we've presented a ton of data here, and we just wanted to give you a couple short statements, just in case you don't remember every single little thing we've said. So I have a couple of high-level takeaways. Again, with community access, we're seeing participation grow. COVID certainly had an effect on numbers, but we think that, that's a blip and that things will continue to grow in community engagement. And then some of our partners have called out for a more in-depth assessment, like should we be tracking more than just numbers of participation, but really get into the kind of the qualitative assessment of how things are progressing and what kind of impact they're having. So that's something we're going to look into in the future. Public access, as Ingrid showed, is clearly increasing across the estuary. And contamination, PCBs are becoming less bioavailable in the fish and the aquatic life that live in the Hudson. For water quality, we're seeing, some water quality improvements, but we're also seeing some water quality improvements leveling off a little bit, which is not necessarily concerning in itself. They might be just reaching equilibrium. But the warming waters is a really clear and concerning trend because it's going to affect a lot of other things. And in the habitat size, we're seeing a loss of natural areas in the watershed, still due to human interventions like development. We are seeing the effects of sea level rise on our coastal areas. And then we're also seeing changes in ecological health related to issues other than habitat, Like, for example, you're seeing like the changes in the fish populations from bycatch and things like that. So things that are a little bit harder to control than just controlling the habitat. So those are our high level takeaways. I know you guys probably have lots of questions, but we want to now turn it to, excuse me one sec, to kind of what we're doing about all of this. So briefly, as Ingrid mentioned, they have an action agenda. My program also has a brand new action agenda that I hope that you'll check out. And I just want to kind of give you a couple examples of from what you've seen in the State of the Estuary Report to then actions we are taking as an organization. So for example, for the concerning area loss of area of tidal wetlands, we're looking at marsh migration. So our group really wants to take a good look at areas where marshes can kind of move inland with sea level rise and areas where they can expand their range. Direct access points in public access. We're going to be looking at where existing and planned public access sites will be impacted by extreme weather events. And we're going to try to elevate local and government planning and management efforts to try to protect some of those access points. For dissolved oxygen and water temperature, we're going to be looking more kind of a watershed perspective and trying to advance watershed plans or pilot projects that try to reduce flood risk and improve water quality at the same time. So looking a little bit more holistically about water quality in the watershed and where it's coming from. For participation in community and science indicator, we have a whole action dedicated to supporting community and science that's supporting our community partners that are already doing this and also trying to encourage more organizations to use science as a way to have their communities interact with the estuary and kind of build new stewards. And then for percent and distribution of natural shorelines, we're going to be looking at our maritime infrastructure and looking at what more can we do to improve the ecological performance of our shorelines, the resiliency of our shorelines. Are there things we can do to places that are already quite engineered, like our piers or bulkheads, to increase the ecological value and do what we can, given, sometimes you have a bulkhead and you need a bulkhead because, of waves or of transportation infrastructure, but are there things that we can do to improve and enhance these structures? So those are just a few examples, and I encourage you guys to check out our action agenda for more of what we are up to.
So I thought I'd add some of the actions that the Hudson River Estuary Management Program is taking to advance these indicators as well. In our new action agenda, we make a number of commitments to, for example, improving the ecological value or softening at least 1 mile of shoreline habitat. We're planning to initiate planning for at least one new swimming area along the Hudson, as well as improve general access or ADA accessibility at least 10 other sites. We are currently working with the U.S. Geological Survey to conduct a salt front study on the Hudson to understand the possible impacts of future shifts in the salt front due to climate change. I know we didn't touch on that indicator in this presentation, but that's one of the metrics. We are also working through our education team to engage at least 10,000 people over the next 5 years in community science and public programs relating to the estuary. And our fisheries team is working to support annual monitoring of contaminants in fish to inform the Department of Health fish consumption advisories. So they're out collecting samples regularly to inform that work. Next slide. So we thought we'd wrap up by sharing some examples of recent work highlighting, again, what we're doing about this all at the Hudson River Estuary Program, working with partners to advance conservation and management in the estuary and watershed. Next slide. So starting in the river, I thought I'd touch on some work by our colleagues in the Hudson River National Estuarine Research Reserve. They have been expanding their research and in the area of restoring submerged aquatic vegetation, working with a research fellow, Taylor Breton from University of Maryland, to pilot restoration techniques. So on the left, you see a clump of SAV plants, which were raised in a greenhouse and then transplanted into the estuary. And they've been doing experiments to refine their methodologies and planning a larger scale expansion of SAV restoration in coming years. Next slide. Piermont Marsh is one of the 4 research reserve component sites. It is the largest brackish tidal marsh in the estuary, which provides really important fish and wildlife habitat and important diversity of plants. However, the marsh has been suffering from erosion due to waves, boat wakes, ice scour, and the impacts of climate change. And it's retreated at over 50 feet in the last 100 years. So in 2022, we began a pilot shoreline resilience and restoration project to reduce erosion at the marsh. Our staff installed 2 intertidal sills made out of small concrete oyster castle blocks along a vulnerable stretch of the shore. And together with some supplemental plantings, this project is reducing wave energy that's reaching the shoreline, and they've been monitoring its success and showing that it's actively resulting in more sediment buildup behind the marsh sill, which is really good news. And they're hoping to expand this shoreline project in the coming years to a longer stretch. Next slide. Staff in our Hudson River Estuary Program Conservation and Land Use team work with local governments to help identify, prioritize, and protect important lands and waters in our watershed, including the significant biodiversity areas I mentioned earlier. And natural resource inventories are an important foundational step in this process to help understand natural assets and ways to conserve them through planning, zoning, and open space protection. Our staff have worked with numerous municipalities in Dutchess County to develop NRIs, and we recently funded an update to the county's natural resource inventory, which has a wonderful interactive online map and report. I encourage you to check that out if you haven't, and also look into the resources available in your municipality and connecting with your Conservation Advisory Council. I think I'm going to turn it over to Anna here.
Yeah, and I wanted to highlight, as the source watershed specialist here, the fact that a lot of Dutchess County is in the extended source water area for the Hudson 7, which is a coalition of 7 municipalities in Dutchess and Ulster County that draw drinking water directly from the Hudson River. I think at the top, Julie mentioned, we're everything is interconnected and we're using our water for a lot of different things. And there are people that are over 100,000 people that are drinking the river every day. That's treated and very safe. So the Hudson 7 just recently finished their drinking water source protection program plan, and it's nearly state accepted, and it's coming out soon. And it includes the contributing watersheds in Dutchess County, including Fishkill, Wappinger, and the Sawkill watersheds, all of which have their own drinking water source protection program plans. So there's a lot of room for convergence and working together in promoting holistic watershed management for wildlife and for people's drinking water. So I just wanted to highlight that. And this is a picture of Rebecca Martin presenting this at a Hudson River Watershed Alliance conference. And they already have their key campaign actions on their website. And as soon as the plan is state accepted, I hope that you'll look at that and think about ways that it can overlap with the missions of the organizations that you're working with or with your own home residential management. Next slide. So we were talking about aquatic connectivity, and I put up these maps of locations where we are working to right-size culverts and areas that have management plans and culvert replacement designs prepared. So both Rhinebeck and Hyde Park have inventories, which include comprehensive assessments of the road stream crossings, including culverts and bridges that are identifying the barriers to aquatic connectivity. And then in Red Hook and Milan, they're actually a one step further with a management plan, and the map on the right shows the locations that have the actual replacement design. So they're ready to get replaced right now. And you can sign up to assess culverts with the North Atlantic Aquatic Connectivity Collaborative, and watershed groups are working to assess culverts. So if that's something that you want to get involved in, you can, and that will help us understand which culverts need to be replaced and in what priority order. Next slide. I also wanted to highlight one example of a success story in Dutchess County, which is an example of a dam removal, which occurred on the East Branch Wappinger Creek in 2017. And once the dam, this was a private landowner, and once the dam was removed, the biological assessment profile score, so that index that Isabel talked about with the macroinvertebrate, improved over the course, like pre and post dam removal. So the integrity of the macroinvertebrate community showed improvement. Also, after the dam was removed, we found migratory fish upstream. So we found American eel upstream of where that dam was. So this is just one example of when you remove an impoundment, how the habitat of the in-stream habitat can rebound. And we want to continue to remove those dams that are not serving their purpose anymore. And we're at the final section of our presentation today, which is volunteer opportunities, one of my favorite things to get to do with my job. So the first one we're going to talk about is the Hudson Estuary Trees for Tribs program. And this is a free tree planting program for private landowners or places like the Dutchess Land Conservancy. Anybody who owns land along a stream in the Hudson River Estuary is eligible for this program. Our spring application season, or just ended in March 1st, but we have a rolling application and we have a fall planting season where if you apply by August 1st, you can get plants put in September. So yeah, this is a free tree planting program in the Hudson River Estuary. And I wanted to show on the next slide just the extent, the scope of this project since 2007. We've planted all over the estuary, 410 sites. These are some high level numbers, over 75,000 plants with over almost 11,000 volunteers that have helped to plant these trees along 31 miles of stream. So this is something that you could definitely get involved in. It is very fulfilling to get to participate and help restore the biodiversity along streams in our estuary. And the next volunteer opportunity is the Hudson River Eel Project. So this is an incredible, very unique program to the Hudson River Estuary. Each spring, there are nets that are placed at the mouth of streams up and down the river, and teams of trained volunteers are catching and counting these glass eels, and we can understand the stock assessment and the management. So we can do indexes like that. We can see how they're doing, their weight, their size, their number. And it's about that time. They're about to be coming up the estuary soon. They're probably all waiting in the bay right now. So on the next slide, you'll see where the eel project locations are. This is a program that began in 2008, so it's been a really long time program. And there's 3 sites in Dutchess County on the Crum Elbow Creek, the Fall Kill, and on Hunter's Brook, which is in Wappingers Falls. And I'll definitely be participating in some of the eel monitoring at those sites. So you can definitely reach out to us if you're interested in coming out in the next couple of months to get to see these incredible creatures, these incredible fish that are coming up the estuary really soon. And I'm going to finish off my slides with the Amphibian Migration Road Stream Crossing Project. So this is another project that we have here, a community science project that's here at the Estuary program, where you can train yourself. You can do this on your own. We have YouTube training videos, so you can go out when the at night temperatures are above 50 degrees and it's raining, and we have a virtual training option. Our in-person training options have closed, but this is an opportunity for people to go out and look at and count the amphibians during their Great Migration, which will be happening soon. So this is when, they are you can see the habitat fragmentation. It's a great learning opportunity to understand where there are these really cool salamanders and frogs and all these amphibians that need to move to be able to mate during the spring season, which is also going to be coming up maybe in the next couple of weeks. This will be before the eels. So this is another really great opportunity to get to directly interact with some of the amazing biodiversity that's here in the estuary. So spring is a very exciting time to get to connect with these more than human beings that we share the estuary with.
Thanks. I realize we're running long, so I'll try to wrap up our last few slides quickly. A few other volunteer opportunities include the Hudson River Striped Bass Cooperative Angler Program. If you get out on the river to fish for striped bass, you can participate and share data about your fishing trips with DEC biologists to help inform management. Next slide. If you are a paddler and like to get out on the Hudson, we work with volunteers to help monitor our SAV beds. Volunteers get training in how to use GPS equipment and go out to sites that are near where they're used to paddling to monitor in the years in between our larger scale mapping events. So we do larger scale SAV mapping roughly every 5 years. And this volunteer effort helps us to understand between those timeframes the trends and patterns. Thanks. Next slide. We encourage you to participate in the Riverkeeper Sweep event. I know there are a number of locations in Dutchess County. We host one site at Norrie Point Environmental Education Center. That's on May 2nd this year. You're welcome to join us. Next slide. I do want to plug our Hudson River Estuary Grants Program. We provide funding for projects to implement priorities in the Hudson River Estuary Action Agenda with funding from the Environmental Protection Fund. And we have 4 annual opportunities related to local stewardship planning, education, access, and tributary restoration. Next slide. We also want to help promote the New York State Environmental Bond Act opportunities, which have been rolling out over the last year and a half or so. There's funding to reduce air pollution, to protect communities from flood risks, to improve water quality, and to protect open space. This is a really important time where there's additional funding available for these projects, and we'd love to connect communities to these opportunities. Next slide. We encourage you to sign up for our newsletters to stay informed about opportunities, and we can put these links in the chat box. Next slide. Also encourage you to check out the Hudson Valley Natural Resource Mapper tool to see more information about natural resources and habitats in the estuary watershed. Next slide. And with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions. And many thanks again for the opportunity to share the State of the Estuary Report today.
Thank you all. That was amazing. I can't believe how much you crammed into that presentation. And for anyone who has been monitoring the chat, Brian, I know has been popping in a lot of those links and resources. If you have not been able to keep up, fear not. I have been taking notes and I will be transcribing all of this into a resource list. So we will be sending out a link to the recording of the webinar and a list of all these resources with links to these various programs and websites for you to dive in. It's probably going to be a pretty long email, I'm going to warn you, because I've got a whole page full of notes here from everything that you have been talking about. But I think that's one of the most important takeaways from tonight is that there are a ton of resources. There is so much going on. There are so many programs. And as you've probably noticed, there are a lot of things that you can do as an individual. There are volunteer opportunities you can do with your family. And if you are a municipal official on your town board or your Conservation Advisory Commission, there's also a lot of resources that you'll see in here that will be applicable to what you're doing as well. So thank you for including all of that. So everyone keep putting your questions into the Q&A. I can see we've got some good ones in there already. But before we start that, I just wanted to let everybody know that registration is now open for our next webinar, which is the final one of the season. I can't believe the season's almost over. It's going to be on Wednesday, April 1st. No fooling. Our speaker will be Kurt Miney from the Alda Leopold Foundation. He's going to be speaking about Alda Leopold, land health, and the evolution of conservation. If you're not familiar with Alda Leopold, he is the author of A Sand County Almanac, which was published in 1949, and it's considered one of the foundational books of conservation. So I'm just saying, between now and then, if you haven't read the Sand County Almanac, you have like a whole month to read it before the presentation. It's not a prerequisite. It's still going to be a wonderful talk, whether or not you have read the book. But definitely, it's a wonderful book that I think will. It's still incredibly timely for something that was published so long ago. So we're really looking forward to wrapping up our season with that. And without any further ado, let's get into the questions. So it looks like we've got some chemistry people here tonight. First question is, what is the average water temperature of the estuary? And what's the ideal average temperature? And this, I think, is referring back to the graphs that you had of the general increase in water temperature as you've been monitoring that trend. They're wondering, what are the causes for that increase?
I could definitely speak to the second part of the question. In terms of the average water temperature and the ideal, I'm not sure actually. But I think if you want to know more about the what's going on in the water temperature on a minute-to-minute basis, you can check out the HRICO's website, which will show you, your local HRICO station and what your water quality or your water temperature has been doing. In terms of the why it's changing, it's really the consensus is that it's climate based, that really our with the estuary, we have our freshwater flows coming down and then our ocean waters coming back up, and our ocean waters are warmer because the oceans are warmer. So, you get these warmer air temperatures, they make the ocean's water warmer, and then, just the tidal exchange, the tides coming up are warmer. So that could be also why we're seeing the water temperature increases a little bit more in the harbor than further up the river.
All right, thank you for answering that question. The next question we have coming in is, how can dissolved oxygen levels be improved in the river?
Does somebody else want to take that, or I can
I
take it?
I could give it a try. I mean, temperature is really closely linked with dissolved oxygen. So that's kind of hard because it's a little bit out of our control. But other factors that impact dissolved oxygen include, nutrients and ammonia. We were talking about the damming of the river, so upstream. So if we improve the overall watershed upstream, but temperature, nutrients, sediments, ammonia are all factors that decrease dissolved oxygen. Isabel, do you have anything to add, or Ingrid?
Tidal wetlands and SAV help to increase dissolved oxygen in the water. So to the extent we can protect and restore those, that's beneficial.
That's right. And I'll also say that while we're seeing definitely some decreases in the dissolved oxygen, it's not bad. The conditions are pretty good. You're nowhere near as like the problematic places that you get, in kind of more enclosed harbors where you have, a lot of the problems with nutrients, and you start to see harmful algal blooms and things like that too, which can exacerbate the oxygen issues.
Yeah, it's very complicated, isn't it? There's never just one cause for something that is so interconnected with so many other factors. I think this is why many of us struggled with chemistry when we were in school, because it is difficult. There are things that are causing the oxygen to go up and things that are causing them to go down, and how are those kind of competing with each other in different parts of the system? It's really complicated. And the next question is about the NRIs, those natural resource inventories that you were talking about. Thank you so much for sharing the screenshot of our Dutchess County natural resource inventory. I will definitely include the link to that for folks that haven't checked it out. Please explore that. There's so many great layers in there of habitats and wetlands, and even soil types are in there. I must warn you, it is somewhat addictive because once you start looking around and seeing how things are connected, it's a lot to dive into, but it really helps to kind of shape your perception and your understanding of the landscape around you. So this is someone from our friends up in the town of Stanford, which is just north of our office here in Millbrook. Stanford completed their NRI last year. And the question is, how can all towns with completed NRIs better collaborate with each other to more effectively implement plans using the regional data collected? And that's just such a good point because, you're as a municipality, you have a boundary, but all of the systems within your town do not stop at those boundaries. So how can towns deal with that? How can they make good use of those plans across municipal boundaries?
Yeah, that's a great question. Congratulations to Stanford on completing their NRI. We're excited to see that. There was just a Dutchess County CAC EMC roundtable recently, and I think that the ability of CACs to work together on policies of interest, there's a lot of promise for exchanging notes on how communities are using their NRIs and potentially banding together to work on policy development, such as designating critical environmental areas, looking at conservation overlay zoning, figuring out ways to streamline how to integrate the NRI to local zoning code and project review. So I think it would be great to take advantage of the EMC and those convenings to have focused discussions on these topics, and maybe for those interested communities to work together. And I will say too that we offer grants for municipal planning projects to implement NRIs. So this is something that is fundable through our program, and intermunicipal projects have an advantage in the grant scoring process. So I would encourage communities to think about opportunities to collaborate on municipal conservation policy.
And for folks who don't know, every town has their local conservation advisory committee. So if you're looking for ways to, y'all talked a lot about volunteerism and ways that you can contribute to the health of the estuary is joining your local CAC and helping them go through the steps to get toward their natural resource inventory. I think is a great way uh, to contribute as well. We've worked with a lot of CACs and they're all really good folks trying to do lots of really good things. Um, and for right now, it looks like, we're about to hit 7:30 here, which is usually our hard stop time. And we've hit all the questions. I think y'all kind of reported on a heroic amount of data, and everyone's kind of letting it simmer a little bit. So I think there'll be more questions. I think that folks will want to definitely be engaging in a lot of those volunteer opportunities, given all the information that y'all provided, and would be excited to probably see a lot. I was trying to plug away those links as I could when y'all were talking, but as Julie mentioned, we'll be sending out a detailed email in the next 24 to 48 hours, maybe to give us a little time because there's going to be a lot of information involved in there. But yeah, I just wanted to say that it was wonderful hosting y'all. The work you guys do is super important and incredible. The amount of projects and data that y'all go through is truly heroic, and we appreciate you.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah. All
Thanks
right,
for
y'all.
having us.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Julie, Brian, and Doug. And yeah, we're really pleased to present. Thanks to everyone for joining tonight. And feel free to reach out if you have additional questions.
Yes, and we'll be sending out those resources in the next day or so.
All right, everyone.
Great.
Thank you for
All right.
joining
Have a
us,
good
and we'll
night.
see you the next
Thank
time.
you all. Have a good night.
Good night.